Hello, planet Earth. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. We're at IDK, my BFF Jill 730. I'm Personnel Young, wishing you warm salutations and congratulations because you've made your way to the Buffington Post. Alright, so we've done lead up to Faith. We talked about Faith and symbolism with comparing her to Kierkegaard's notion of faith, and we also talked about how she can be related to the young Goodman Brown character Faith, and we talked about Slayer dreams and what it is to be the active Slayer, and we talked about how Faith came to be, we talked about how Faith came to be a murderer, and we talked about how Faith went into a coma and came all the way back to Sunnydale and ended up this series. So now, everybody, I would like to invite you to reach into your super gay Buffy bag, your Watcher's Diary, and your homework. Because today we're going to take everything we learned about Faith and try and get some perspective on the character. So with no further ado, here's our Buffyverse discussion on perspective on Faith.
Someone once told me the grass is much greener on the other side. Well, I paid a visit, while it's possible I missed it. It seemed different, yet exactly the same. Till further notice, I'm in between, I'm in between. From where I'm standing, my grass is green. Someone once told me the grass is much greener on the other side.
Okay, so to start off with, I don't know how many of you actually study Buffy as a text. Maybe you do, maybe you think that whole notion sounds silly, but if you do, there are a few books that I would like to recommend. Nikki Stafford, rather, has Bite Me, the unofficial guide to Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And then she also has Once Bitten, which is the unofficial guide to the world of Angel. They've got a couple of essays, they've got just different little things about everything, and not really episode reviews, but kind of like episode synopses, and she'll say oops if, there was camera work or nitpicks about continuity stuff like I like to talk about, and she'll talk about like the Angel connection and all this good stuff. There's really good stuff in here. It's kind of fluff, but if you're trying to slowly merge your way into Buffy studies, I would recommend it. There's Reading Angel, the TV spinoff with a soul. It's a collection of essays about the different facets of just Angel and the television process and what it means, and there's some really interesting stuff in here. A bit overwritten, but that tends to be the way it is with these Buffy studies. I actually looked into the first kind of chapter in this, which is written by Phil Colvin. It is Angel, Redefinition, and Justification Through Faith. I actually referred to this before I made this video, so yay. Also, a really good one to check out, a little overwritten if you ask me, but overall there's some really great stuff to be found in Why Buffy Matters, the Art of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She dissects a lot, she goes way into like nomenclature and all this good stuff. It's really good stuff. Like I said, it's a bit overwritten, but so were the books of Ascension, and they came in handy. So I would really recommend this one. One that I would not recommend at all, and the only reason I've kept it around is so that I can tell people not to get it, is The Quotable Slayer. Don't get this book. It's got some color pictures in it, which you might want to take out for yourself, but aside from that, a lot of these quotes are just wrong. They're wrong quotes. There are other books out there. There's Fighting the Forces, which talks about Buffy and philosophy, and there's also What Would Buffy Do? It talks about Buffy and Christian imagery, and there's just a ton of Buffy studies books out there if you want to find them. So they're at your disposal. Look for them if you're interested. So today we are going to, before we get into the comics, like I said, try and gain a little perspective on Faith as her own character and not just as a foil for Buffy and really, being her own person. And so you'll have to forgive me. I took a lot of notes for this because I wanted to be pretty thorough. The first thing to remember is that it is Buffy's show. It's called Buffy the Vampire Slayer. All of the characters and all of the experience that we are made privy to, everything that we see presented to us is going to affect Buffy. Like, even if it's about a different character, that character's actions and experiences are going to affect Buffy. That is the only reason we are seeing them. You feel me? Like, we're supposed to take the show or the comic books and say, okay, well, this is affecting Buffy this way, or at least her world. And so, when Faith shows up, she is considered by Buffy much like Kendra was, as a foil or even a threat, and not just as a threat to her physically, but really kind of philosophically. Because where Kendra threatened her philosophically, it was in not, being herself. Kendra had been kind of sequestered away from the world, whereas Faith very much lives in the world to a higher degree than does Buffy, because Buffy very much participates in the world, whereas Faith is very worldly, if you catch my meaning. And so Buffy's resentment and overall self-involvement are what kind of create Faith into a foil, because Buffy is a very self-involved character, and it's something that she knows, it's something that she acknowledges, but it doesn't change the fact that she is very, very self-involved. And so basically, as soon as Faith shows up, she's like, how soon can I make this about me? And she very much does. This is what Buffy does with everything. It's part of what we love about the character. But as Faith is a shadow character for Buffy, it's very much because Buffy herself and the whole property relegate her to that role. Faith isn't allowed to really be her own character. She is a foil for Buffy because Buffy has kind of forced her into that role. And so all of this goes down, right? Like, we see Buffy, like, not really being able to relate to Faith all the way through season 4, and it's not until Buffy is stuck in Faith's body and seeing the way that people are treating Faith that she can actually relate to Faith. People are spitting in her face, and they're actually just going to kill Faith. The Watchers Council guys are just going to kill her. And Buffy's like, oh shit, Faith, it sucks to be her. Yeah, she made these decisions, but, she's a child when it comes down to it. Like, the thing about it is Buffy is kind of a child, and Faith is kind of a child. And so, like, the reaction that Buffy is getting from people when they perceive her as Faith really affects her. And so her perception of Faith changes as Faith was, like, just beating the shit out of her own body. Like, when Buffy gets back into her body, she feels just how much Faith really meant that, and it strikes her. And she really does kind of feel this, amount of pathos with Faith. And then, of course, she finds out that Faith had up and screwed Riley, and that just goes all the way to hell, and she's, like, ready to kill her, right? So, okay, we talked about Faith and how she relates to Kierkegaard's representation of Faith, and we also talked about Young Goodman Brown and how Faith can be seen as that character. But the one character that has always really stuck with me about Faith is Lady Macbeth, and how she is very Lady Macbethan in her whole, like, dynamic. And so you've got, like, Buffy and Faith, and they are, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth, if you will. Yeah, Buffy doesn't actually kill anybody, but we'll get into that. We're basically just looking at Faith as Lady Macbeth. You've got this whole thing where Faith is very much, like, impatient. She's like, I'm going to drop myself down in the hornet's nest, and I hope Buffy will follow after me because I can't wait. She's got this, like, oh, I just can't wait to be king thing that Lady Macbeth really has, right? She rushes into action, she doesn't want to wait around, and so this is essentially what gets Home Dude killed, and so she kills this man, right? And the whole thing about being the king is, like, Lady Macbeth wants to, be the queen, because kinghood and queenhood is just like Faith, putting yourself above the universal. And so Lady Macbeth is ready for this. Faith is ready to put herself above the universal. And so, yeah, like, Faith is actually the one who kills this guy, but Buffy is, like, with her. Like, they're in it together, you know what I mean? And so Faith, when Buffy comes to Faith after this incident, we see Faith in the sink, like, scrubbing a shirt, but it's very Lady Macbeth. It's like, damn this bloody spot, you know what I mean? And so then, in Buffy's dream that she and Faith are in together, she actually gets flashes of, Faith's knife, and, it's like Macbeth seeing daggers, okay? So, but we're not, really going to call Buffy Macbeth, because, like I said, she didn't really kill anybody, but, but just bear with me. And so then when Faith goes over to Angels and he's kind of convinced her not to, die and just give up on herself. This demon attacks her, and she like sees this blood on her hands. Like I said, it wasn't like demon blue or green blood, it was like red blood, and she sees this blood on her hands just like Lady Macbeth, and it's driving her crazy. Angel is basically saying, don't come over into my show and try and be Buffy's Lady Macbeth, because I don't have time for that. Like, you've got to, pull yourself together. I'm not going to let you kill yourself because you're nobody's Lady Macbeth. You don't have to be anybody's shadow character. Over here, there is no Buffy. And so Buffy is, ironically, there, you know what I mean? And so he tells Buffy this. He's like, this is so not about you. Like, Faith has not to do with you. This is about saving somebody's soul. My decisions and my choices are just those. You need to go the fuck on somewhere because you don't even really care about Faith. We have all of this relation between Angel and Faith. Like, Angel and Faith kind of redefine one another in that Angel at this point is going to shift gears as a show, and it's going to become more about this notion of saving people's souls, whereas Faith is going to take everything that Angel gives her and become a better person for it in her own right. And the parallels between the two characters are really neat, because just like Angel, when he was all evil or whatnot, he was torturing Giles. Faith, when she comes to LA, she's trying to torture Wesley. And then, like, the way, you see, Darla is another shadow character for Buffy. She's this blonde woman who, like, gives herself to Angel and changes him forever. And she kills him and all this good stuff. And, like, we see that the way that Darla treated Angel after he had received his soul is just the way that Buffy treats Faith once she has killed this man. It's like they can't see beyond this one thing about the character. Wesley, when he introduces her to the rest of the Angel crew, he introduces her as Faith, the Vampire Slayer, and we see that he is appreciating her for who she has become. And it's never expressly stated, but he's kind of accepting his own role in her evolution and why she did turn. And, Faith and Wesley, finally, over on Angel in Season 4, are able to work together as a Watcher and Slayer ought to, because Buffy is not in the picture, you see? And so when Faith and Angelus are first fighting before they go into the trance, he's trying to, like, spin Faith's head, and he tells her, you're just like me. And she says, I'm not like you. I don't have to be Buffy's shadow character any more than I have to be Angel's shadow character. And while, yes, Faith is technically a shadow for both of those characters simultaneously, that really makes her into her own character. She doesn't have to relegate herself to her guilt, and she doesn't have to relegate herself into her comparison with Buffy. And so, once again, like, in the trance thing, Faith is all gonna die, and Angel comes to her and he's like, dude, don't be Buffy's Lady Macbeth. Like, I don't have time for that. You don't just get to give up. Everything you've learned over here on my show, you need to keep that. Don't be some dead bitch. We've got enough of those in Sunnydale right now. So, of course, Faith returns to Sunnydale, and we find out that Scoobies are dicks. Okay, so basically, once Faith leaves and goes to LA in Season 4, they mention her a few times every now and then, but really, they don't bring Faith up at all. It's like they don't even think about her. And they didn't tell her that this whole situation was going on with the Bringers and the First Evil trying to wipe out the Slayer line. They thought she was safe in jail, where she was attacked by, like, agents of the First. So whatever, the Scoobies are dicks to Faith. They are on Buffy's side, just like we're supposed to be. But as an audience, we can no longer hold ourselves to the Sunnydale version of Faith, because they weren't there to that. They aren't privy to Faith's evolution as a character and what we've seen her become. And so you've got characters like Andrew who have never met Faith, but because of what they know through Buffy, Andrew has taken what he knows about Faith from Buffy and her friends and is trying to tell these potential slayers about it. He's never met her. He doesn't have any frame of reference other than Buffy's own perception of Faith. And so we see that the other potentials are really intrigued by Faith. This other Slayer, how does that work? What's she about? Because all we've seen is stick up her ass Buffy. And so these other potential Slayers are like looking up to Faith, and they're seeing that, being a Slayer doesn't mean one thing. Being a Slayer is just being who you are. And people are different. And, there's this big power struggle that kind of erupts unexpectedly between Buffy and Faith, and Buffy refuses to see Faith as an equal. And when everybody else sees that it's Buffy's way or the highway, they choose the highway. They choose to follow Faith because at least she's not dictating that they have to. And so this is something else that you have to keep in perspective. These other girls haven't been in Sunnydale this whole time. They get to look at Faith through fresh eyes. And then when the first, as the mayor, comes to Faith, we see that she does still have this young woman in her who needs that kind of guiding force in her life. And in the comic books, she's going to get that through Giles in the same way that Buffy kind of had that, but on a very different kind of balance and wavelength. The mayor is there to show us that as much as any character grows, they are still tied to their hearts, you know what I mean? Like, Faith, in the dream that she shared with Buffy, told Buffy to use the mayor's human weakness against him, which was, basically flashing Faith's knife at him in order to tug at his heartstrings. And here we see that Faith has those same heartstrings. The mayor is able to affect her just as her memory was able to affect him. And so, despite how much you evolve as a character, you're never going to lose those loves in your life. And so, with Buffy and Faith, by the end, they do sort of reconcile with one another. They say, I'm in charge, no, you're in charge, and then, once Faith gets everybody, blowed up, she's like, I don't want to be in charge. And Buffy's like, yeah, nobody does, but, we've got this. And like I said in my Faith Part 2, she and Faith kind of come to this realization that they are in it together, and that Buffy can't just pick and choose what parts of Faith she's going to use. She has to accept her as who she has become. And, with the whole Scythe situation, Faith says it feels like it belongs to me, because it does, as much as it belongs to any of these other Slayers that are out there in the world right now. So I hope that that's helped you to kind of put Faith in perspective and see how our perspective of Faith is so affected by Buffy's perception when she's on Buffy. You always have to keep in mind who your main character is when you're watching something like this, and how a character like Faith is presented to you. You have to kind of take yourself away from Buffy and just kind of try and look at the world through Faith's eyes. Willow and some of the other characters have this same problem. It's hard to look at them outside of Buffy's understanding of them. That's why Willow, in the comic books, she spent some time over on Angel and Faith, because she's a character who has regrets. And yes, Buffy has things that she has remorse about, but really, Buffy is not a character who holds on to regret. She doesn't have regrets. She's trucking through her life, trying to leave the past behind her and work toward a future. Whereas the characters over on Angel and Faith, they are characters who have real regret. And Willow is afforded a little bit of that over on Angel and Faith, because it's not something that you can explore within the parameters of Buffy, you see. So that's pretty much all I had to say about perspective on Faith and her being her own person and not just a shadow for anybody. I hope you enjoyed today's Buffyverse discussion. I'm Fresnel Young. You can come right back here to the Buffington Post at IDK, my BFF Jill 730. You can come back anytime for Buffy the Vampire Slayer reviews, Angel and Faith reviews, more Buffyverse discussions on the other Slayers, and my opening themes are in their own playlist by themselves. We're having a great 2015 so far, and have a great day. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Someone once told me the grass is much greener on the other side. Well, I paid a visit, but it's possible I missed it. It seemed different, yet exactly the same. Till further notice, I'm in between. I'm in between. From where I'm standing, from where once told me the grass is much greener on the other side.